Hello. Welcome to the OTC Markets Educational Webinar Series for OTCQX and OTCQB traded companies. My name is Bob Power, and I'm Vice President of Corporate Services at OTC Markets. We thank all of our attendees for joining us today. So as an introduction, based on feedback from our issuers and also feedback from our recent survey that we did to all OTCQX and OTCQB traded companies, we decided to co-host this webinar with PR Newswire on maximizing your press release results. OTC Markets is pleased to partner with PR Newswire. For example, on our OTCIQ.com website, PR Newswire is integrated into our OTC Disclosure news service, and we'll talk a bit more about that during the presentation. We have also partnered with PR Newswire on regional events and virtual investor conferences. So joining us from PR Newswire are Pam Bartlett, Vice President Channels, Kathy Spicer, Manager of Customer Content and Services, and Danielle Capriato, Manager of Strategic Communications. Thanks again to PR Newswire for co-hosting this with us, and at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Danielle.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks again for everybody for joining us today. My name is Danielle, and I manage strategic communications here, which means I have a lot of fun experience with press releases. First, we're going to go over a few questions that folks might have about press releases, such as who should send a release, are press releases still relevant, why should I send a press release, when should I send a release, what should my release be about, and how can I maximize my PR results? Well, some of the answers to these questions might be a little obvious. If you're listening into this webinar, obviously you should be sending a press release, and of course they're definitely relevant today. We're going to go over a few of the reasons why and what sort of press releases you can incorporate into your public relations, communications, marketing strategies. First of all, the industry, the public relations industry, of course, has continued to evolve over the years. Kathy, I wanted to loop you in or bring you into this conversation here since you have such experience here at PR Newswire. What can you say about the evolution of the industry today?
Well, thanks, Danielle. So I have 21 years at PR Newswire, so I have seen a lot in how this business has changed. And as you can see on the slide, you know, when I started even 21 years ago, it was all about getting text to the journalists, to the financial market, and getting that release to the media. And then over time, things started to really change. Maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, people were more interested in including multimedia assets, telling more of a story and targeting not only the media, but the consumer. And then today, it's a whole bag of text, video, infographics, other content as part of an entire strategy or campaign that goes to help with paid media placement, owned media that you own, that you send out, and earned media pickup that you will get from sending out news releases. I think the big arc in all of that is that the audience is changing. Yes, the media still wants and needs to know your news, but the audience now includes consumers and the general public. So as you're starting to think about why you should be sending out news releases, think about your audience. Who needs to know about what you're doing, and what type of content do you want to share with them?
Thanks, Kathy. As she said, audience is such a huge important factor in making sure that your content is tailored to every possible audience. That includes your investors, consumer users of your product, the media, everybody. And sending out a press release has a lot of benefits. And the four major ones that we like to discuss are that, of course, press releases are the media's second most important source for story ideas. News media, traditional media, and now bloggers and other influencers regularly access press releases for story ideas and for more information about a company. They provide legitimacy, so if you're sending out a regular cadence of news, people are going to be able to find more information about your company quicker and easier. It will help with your discoverability online, and it will, of course, the earned media aspect will also provide legitimacy as more people become aware of your company as you regularly send out information. The steady stream of news, like I said, a regular cadence of news release will help you be found more in search. That discoverability aspect is so important when you're planning your communication strategy. And lastly, they're very versatile. It's not just that standard issue press release anymore. It's not only your earnings release, which of course you should do. Those are very important. But it helps you enter the industry conversation as a thought leader if you continue to share knowledge that your company has and the expertise that the members of your organization can share. Press releases, as versatile as they are, can take on many shapes. We've identified what we like to consider the 3 main archetypes of press releases, and we're going to go into each one a little more in depth and explore how those can be utilized in your communications campaigns. First is that standard news announcement that's probably more familiar to folks who have an investor relations role, but we'll still cover it, of course. We have the evergreen and feature content. This is a little different. This is when you'll start getting into more of that thought leadership content, trying to maybe incorporate news events or seasonal events as you're expressing that, thought leadership expertise that your company has. And then content marketing. We're seeing so many more content marketers and other marketers using press releases as a way to promote their content marketing or as a way to syndicate the content that they're creating. So first, we will cover the standard news announcement. These are those time-honored press releases, personnel announcements, earnings, new product launches, the corporate communications and investor relations angles that we're all super familiar with. We've been writing those press releases since our PR 101 classes. The audience for these, as Kathy said before, since audience is such a critical aspect of your press release, will be current and future investors. Of course, you need to communicate with your current investors about what's going on with your company, and you're looking to encourage more people to invest. Customers, current customers, and future customers, leads, and prospects will be finding your news through search, so you're writing for them as well. And then the news media and other influencers, again, those bloggers and everybody who might be interested in writing about your company as a way to access and glean that earned media that is so critical these days. And then as to the evergreen and feature content, the big key here with evergreen content is that it's going to be written more to that consumer audience. You're looking to talk to the customers that are using your product. The great thing about this evergreen content is that it's fresh. You have the ability to incorporate seasonal news items, and encouraging more engagement in your company's news. It doesn't expire. That's what the evergreen part of this means. It's going to be longer lasting. It'll increase your search visibility over a longer period of time if you continue to put out this evergreen feature style, more interesting content. It's accessible. The point of this news is to write it in the language that your consumer audiences are going to want to read and the language that they're going to identify with. That will make it easier for them to engage with it. It'll make it more interesting for them, and it will help, again, with that discoverability. We all know that search these days wants that natural, high-quality content, so this is where the evergreen feature news will come into play. And then it smells nice. Not really, but, have to throw a little bit of humor in sometimes. But again, the key here with this content is that it brings your message straight to your consumer audiences in ways they want to read and share. It's all about encouraging engagement with your content. That's the huge importance here of that evergreen news. And then content marketing. Really great aspect of how content marketing and public relations are merging more and more these days is that we're seeing these great instances of brands who are able to use press releases to get more visibility out of the content that they're already creating. So you can write a press release that will promote maybe your greatest blog post that you've published lately, or maybe to promote a webinar that you're holding, or any other sort of content that your brand is already creating. Having that added visibility that you'll get from either syndicating that content or by encouraging people to access it through a press release is going to be absolutely critical in building new audiences and all of those wonderful things. So the great thing here is that you're going to gradually build more brand awareness by generating more views and building your audience. You'll be able to promote your brand's thought leadership that they're already creating. You'll get to stay part of your industry's conversation. Again, that will help establish you as a thought leader, will highlight your expertise. And then the biggest part of content marketing, of course, is engaging, nurturing, and converting leads. It's a critical component here that you'll be able to reach people who would either be interested in investing in your company or purchasing your company's goods and services. So I cannot express more how important it is to start identifying opportunities to use a press release to promote your brand's content. And now, again, I want to bring Kathy in, who's going to give some great tips on formatting and writing your next press release.
All right, thank you, Danielle. So the next thing, a couple of things I want to talk about now that we've kind of identified what we consider our three main archetypes of news releases, and really what needs to go in those types of news releases. So we'll talk about a couple of key formatting tips, and these are things that should be in any type of press release that you're going to be sending out, whether it's a required announcement because you need to stay in compliance with your exchange, or you're going to use one of those more standard pieces or a content marketing piece. So the first thing we'll talk about are headlines. Again, I'm going to go back to saying considering your audience and what do they need to know. Best practices that we tend to recommend is keeping your headlines concise and keep it short, and you can use a subhead to provide additional context. And I think it's one of those things that when I read a news release, when those releases feed out, especially over the wires, the headline is the first thing that they're going to see. So if you have a concise, informative headline that tells them what's happening right away, that's going to increase your chances of that news release being used and it being shared and it being written about. But at the same time, the audience isn't just about media. It's also about other audiences, whether it's bloggers and influencers or general consumers. Keep in mind that when they're reading through a release, you know, we just came out of an earnings season at PR Newswire, and we would see 30, 40, 50 pages of earnings text with some companies, and these are really dense, kind of hard to read. So think about using bolding to make it purposeful, to draw the eye naturally, to make a certain element of that content easier to consume. You know, feeding, like adding bullet points, things like that that will make that information easier for people to grasp. Including links. You know, it's what we recommend is not using a ton of links, but making sure that there's a clear call to action. Where can they get more information? Where do you want them to go? What do you want them to do when they get there? And again, with the search and discoverability, is making sure that you don't have the same link in the release 8 times. We recommend a couple of very key strategic placements of that link. Don't duplicate the release, the link over and over and over, because that tends to not give you the best results when it comes to search. And then finally, multimedia. Consider, are there any visual assets that could enhance that particular release? Videos, logos, infographics, headshots, or screenshots. How can a visual asset be used to make that story more impactful? What we find is that releases that include those multimedia assets tend to get a lot more visibility than those that don't. And some media points now won't run anything without an image. So it's important that you consider how you would want to use multimedia assets to enhance that particular message. But since we're also talking to people who are from OTC companies, we want to talk about stock symbol best practices. So when you're sending out a news release, especially a standard news announcement, those required pieces that you need to make sure you're getting out to your investors and to the media, you want to always make sure that you're including your U.S. market and ticker symbol, and that allows investors to easily identify and be able to trade your stock. They can sign up to receive those news alerts and also find your company in historical financial databases. You know, there are very popular sites that search very easily by ticker symbol. So we want to make sure that you're including those in your news releases that you're sending out. What PR Newswire does is we code for those ticker symbols in the press releases to ensure that the major financial sites and portals will pick them up. And our recommendation is a very specific naming convention, is that you have your company name, parentheses, the exchange you're traded on, colon, space, symbol, and parentheses. That is the easiest, most easily digestible format that we can use for a stock symbol that will allow that release to get indexed on the financial sites. It also helps to link your company to the otcmarkets.com quote page. So that's also something we want to make sure is in that news release. And it's helpful if it's clearly identified. So but moving on from that, let's talk about a couple of content best practices. Discovery has such an impact. So these best practices are will help your search engine pick up, but also, it's important that releases are written for humans, not necessarily robots. Tactics when it came to content were about gaming the system. They were suggesting that you stuff a release full of keywords, doing a lot of backbuilding with links. Today, it's all about the quality of the content. So Google wants quality content, so do we. So we want to talk about original content that's useful and interesting. Think about what your audience likes to read. Again, beyond those standard news announcements you need to send out, who do you want to reach? What do you want them to do with the information? How can you target a new audience? Show that you're an authority on the information that you know best by writing about it well. Use natural language. Content that's well written simply works with everyone. Be natural. Focus on writing well. In some industries, the jargon's really heavy, and if someone is really familiar with that industry, they understand the jargon, but if you're trying to broaden that outreach, lose some of the jargon, and it can help expand your audience beyond your niche. And I'm going to tell you a little story. NASA, we all know about NASA, rockets, astronauts. They're great at content. Everyone knows and enjoys NASA news. We all followed the astronaut that was in space for almost a year. They share all types of news, so they talk about contracts that they win, technical information, education, social, everything. And the reason they do so well is they tie their content to the audience always, no matter the topic. And one of my favorite examples is a release they wrote about a new engine part for a spacecraft. It was a really complicated name. It would have been lost in a highly technical release. But in order to engage the reader on that news that's traditionally not super excited about rocket parts, they made it relatable. They tied the engine part's importance to that of the beating of a human heart. And that was the focus of the release. And it did really, really well. Just got tons and tons of visibility, excuse me. Keeping your headlines tweetable. Under 100 to 120 characters with the most pertinent information up front. 65 characters is the length of a headline in the search result. It's the approximate length where an email subject line cuts off. It's also approximately the length a newsroom will see if they get a headline feed. If your headline needs to be long, make sure that the information, the critical information for context is up front. And I'll encourage you to test yourself. Write a headline, put your cursor at the 65 character mark, including the spaces, and does that headline still make sense? But sometimes the headline isn't enough. This is a subheadline can help really with context. You can use, and this is where you can include extra information, additional keywords of importance. Instead of a really long headline, you can write a brief, easy-to-read headline and elaborate in the subhead. A subhead also serves as a great teaser. It keeps your reader interested too. And the search engines show approximately the first 100 characters beyond the headline in a description underneath the headline result. Use that space to tease for more information. Meaningful descriptive words, also known as keywords, in the headline. If you use a mix of keywords and key phrases and related synonyms throughout the text, Google understands variety. It will pair it together like restaurants and places to eat are treated the same. So use some variety. Your reader will also be happy with that. And finally, timing does matter. What happens in our business with news releases going out, avoid on the hour. If you can time it to go 6 minutes after, 7 minutes after, there's less competition at that time and your visibility could increase. One of the things to keep in mind if you're publicly traded, we keep in mind the hours of market open and market close. The market's open at 9:30, the market's close at 4 o'clock. There are, your internal counsel should tell you when you need to send your news releases out. For releases that are not material news, that are those lighter pieces, that's when I would recommend you consider the off-hour distributions. If you know that you need to have something out prior to the market open, you want to send it at 9 o'clock, we'll send it at 9 o'clock. It's just something to keep in mind if you have a softer piece or a more evergreen piece that you want to send out, is you can take a look at the timing and where that would make a difference. So the next thing I want to talk about is newsworthiness. Journalists are busy, and that's one of those things. They are increasingly busy. If you follow the media industry as a whole, some news organizations have been decimated with cuts in the last several years. The person that used to cover one beat now covers 3. So they are extremely busy. They want to cultivate those relationships, and they don't want to waste their time. So make sure you get to the so what right away. When you're sending that news release out, keep that in mind when you're writing your headline in your first paragraph. It's great to announce something that you're doing, but it's not going to catch the eyes if it's not clear on why it matters. And also make sure it reaches the appropriate journalist within the right newsroom. So making sure that you're considering the distribution that you're using and making sure that you have cultivated those relationships with the appropriate journalists within those different points. It helps if you understand what they already cover, who their audience is, and the end consumer, and ultimately who you want to reach with your message. And one of the things that we also recommend is making sure that you cultivate that relationship before you need it. If you start to develop those relationships and you know that you have a really, really big story that's coming out later this year, to have the journalists already ready to get that news and be able to act on it is a great technique to have available to you to make sure that that release gets picked up immediately. And then also, again, knowing who the journalist, the audience, and the blogger covers and the content creator covers, the end consumer, ultimately who you want to reach with that particular message. Because I think when you think about your overall content strategy, you have to look at it a couple of different ways. You have the types of media that you own, your own channels, your website, your blog, especially your social media presence. And then by sending out news releases, particularly through a provider, it helps to increase that awareness and engagement by putting those releases out through other distribution and syndicated networks that you maybe don't have access to. And that can really help in terms of broadening that particular section of that news so it gets the most visibility. So now that I've covered some formatting tips and content best practices, I'm going to turn this over to Pam, who's going to cover some of the components of our newsline distributions and provide some details on what services and benefits are available to you through the PR Newswire OTC Markets Partnership.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. So this is Pam Bartlett. I've actually been with PR Newswire for 22 years, so we have a lot of years on this call. I've had numerous roles, but as Vice President of Channels, I manage our strategic partnerships, including our relationship with OTC markets. So what I'd like to do is just start out in this segment and talk a little bit about, an overview of PR Newswire's reach. So if we look at the news distributed via PR Newswire, we're actually reaching institutional investor portals such as Bloomberg, FactSet, Thomson One, and Dow Jones. And thinking about Thomson, just remember that that includes all their former and current products such as Moneyline, Bridge, ILX, and Quotron. So they're basically all rolling up under that umbrella. We also are reaching financial portals including Seeking Alpha and Motley Fool, retail investor portals such as E-Trade, Schwab, and TD Ameritrade. And then we also reach thousands of media sites through domestic and international news options. So just keep in mind on the domestic end, this includes nearly 3,000 outlets through the Associated Press, and this is including New York Times, ABC News, History Channel, BuzzFeed. There's a huge variety there. And your news also reaches more than 550 news content systems like Moody's, SmartBreeze, LexisNexis, and McGraw-Hill. We also have a very comprehensive online reach. We have 4,500 content syndication partners through online news sites and databases, including Yahoo Finance, MarketWatch, and Reuters. And as you can imagine, these are very high-profile sites, and they have a very large viewership. So what this is going to do is really increase the chance that people will see your news. And then also, we reach OTCmarkets.com via PR Newswire's partnership with PR Newswire through the disclosure and news service, as well as broker-dealers and other subscribers. So next, I just wanted to touch on the distribution options that are available through OTCIQ.com. So essentially what happens is the OTCIQ subscribers that use OTC disclosure and news service can also distribute their news through PR Newswire's network. And they can do so at discounted rates. And I'm going to touch on the logistics of all this a little later in a later slide, but I wanted to provide a summary of what distributions are available. So first off, we have U.S. distributions. We have geographic options such as local, regional, and national. Keep in mind our U.S. domestic distributions include all major media, that's including broadcast and print. We include industry trade distribution, thousands of websites, and then also disclosure points. And also on the social note, keep in mind as well that all of our press releases include a social media toolbar, and that's going to assist with easy sharing of your content. On the international front, we do have a few international options that are available through OTCIQ. Currently, we have a UK, Singapore, and Canadian distribution. Right now, we're solely focused on English-only countries, or rather, countries where English is the primary language. We also make available EDGAR filings, including 8K and 6K filings. And then we additionally have something called Capital Markets Visibility Lists, and these are add-on distributions. So you pick your core distribution, and then you can target sell-side and buy-side analysts in 34 different industries. So you can either go with sell-side only, buy-side only, or a combination of both. And these lists are pulled from a database that includes 100,000 contacts at more than 22,000 financial institutions globally. And we do thousands of updates a day through our partner, and we make that data available constantly. So the benefit here is you're taking advantage of constant updates and the most relevant and up-to-date list. So next I wanted to touch a little bit on how to access PR Newswire via OTCIQ.com. So PR Newswire is integrated into OTC Disclosure News Service. And once you enter OTCIQ.com, the portal, you'll have an option to select PR Newswire's news distribution. So you can see there at the left, essentially, once you've logged in, you would select Add News Release, and then you'll be prompted to select a PR Newswire distribution. And then from there, you'll be able to add your content, review your order, and pay and confirm. Once you hit the send button, that's going to go to PR Newswire, and then someone's going to give you a call, one of our editorial team, to confirm your details and get everything set up. So it's very super easy, very user-friendly. On the same note, I wanted to just pull in a few more interesting points on OTCIQ. So the PR Newswire integration is a cost-effective and streamlined way to broaden the dissemination of your company news. And you can see the cost schedule there below. And I wanted to bring this up because as an exclusive benefit to OTCIQ subscribers, you will receive 700 words as your base word count, as your core base, and then you would be charged for each additional 100 words. This is compared to a 400 word count that's typically available through PR Newswire. We also provide, as I mentioned, the SEC reporting. Companies may use OTCIQ.com to file press releases with the SEC as an 8K or 6K through PR Newswire's EDGAR filing service. And then filing through the Disclosure and News Service and PR Newswire does help fulfill QX and QB reporting requirements along with the SEC requirements. So now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Bob.
Well, thank you, Pam. We appreciate the update. That was great, very informative. So we do have a few questions. The first question is, can attendees get a copy of the slide presentation? And I can answer that. Yes, we will be sending a recorded copy to all attendees. The second question that came in is regarding how much time is optimal lead time if you're going to pitch a journalist? So I don't know if you want to take that,
Kathy,
Pam,
do you want to take that?
Okay.
I think when it comes to pitching a journalist, I think first you need to know who the journalist is and what their publishing schedule is like. If it's, especially with some of the industries, might have more of a trade publication, those publishing schedules are going to be a little of a longer lead versus a daily newspaper or a website that tends to publish content on a regular basis. So I think, when it comes to how you want to pitch, it depends on what you want to pitch for. If it's about a big event, if it's about a big, if you have, I'll just use an example of doing something that would be really great, like a community-based, your company is going to do a big kind of corporate social responsibility thing that you want to get some extra PR for, making sure you give them as much time as you can, a couple of weeks to a month out, is to start to let them know what's coming up, and then, let them know how, why you want them to kind of cover that event and what that story is going to be, and help them craft that story. With other publications, I think it just depends on what their lead times are for when they have to get issues to print.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, what are specific examples of evergreen feature content that you discussed?
Danielle, I think you are on that topic.
Sure. Actually, I think Kathy she covered that NASA example of the rocket part that is like a beating heart. I know that's everybody's favorite, and she deals so much with client copy, she might have a few more recent examples to discuss.
I kind of go back to the corporate social responsibility initiative. That's always a good one. That's sort of, it might have a timeliness to it, but that's something that kind of carries on throughout the year. Any kind of product launches, because once that product is out, it's not like the product goes away. So, those are a couple of examples that I would offer about evergreen content. You want to think about if an event is happening, if people are speaking at an investor conference, that's a very finite event. If you're thinking about other things that your company is doing, what's the shelf life of that particular type of announcement? If it's about an ongoing product that is being brought to market, there's a lot more time that news release will be relevant once it's been distributed.
We're also right up on April Fool's Day, as you all might know. It's March 30th. We've seen an increase in kind of humorous content. It's important to note that you really must indicate in your press release if it is meant to be April Fool's or humorous content, but it still offers an opportunity to kind of play up a more fun, playful side of your brand. And I think that I've seen, for example, some car companies sending out content that was kind of joking, like, come test drive our car, but if you don't, we'll find you. And it's meant to be kind of this way to reach your consumer audiences or other audiences and show the more human side of your brand.
We've had, and this is Kathy, I'll also chime in on that. We've had a couple of really clever ones where, it's about Chester Cheeto releasing a fragrance, and it was an April Fool's release. And I think, again, like Danielle said, it's really important because when you're sending out a news release, it spreads really, really quickly. Once something is out, it doesn't go away. So, it's really important that you identify to the reader that it is in fun, because things will get picked up and get written about, and if it's actually not a true story, that can damage your credibility later on down the road. So if you're going to have some fun with it, we encourage you to have fun. It's just you've got to spell it out at somewhere in that news release that, Happy April Fool's Day, everybody. We just want to make sure that we don't mislead anybody who's reading that story.
That's great. Thanks, guys. Okay, we have a couple of more questions in, so I'll read the next one. With the oversaturated news industry, how do you have your press release stand out other than images? Are there other forms of press releases that can draw the attention of a targeted audience?
That's an outstanding question. This is Danielle again. While we speak a lot about the value of incorporating multimedia, images, video, other sorts of visual content. Having a multi-channel strategy is really the critical piece here, making sure that your own channels and that your social media and everything is synced up, and that you're sharing a coherent message across all of those channels at the same time is really going to help everything stand out. Making sure that your release is formatted and written in a way that it can be easily shared across social media will also help it stand out. And writing in that natural language, avoiding jargon wherever possible. Those are all ways that you'll get people's interest better and they'll stay interested longer and make sure that they read your whole piece of content. Kathy, do you have any other suggestions?
No. And well, the only other thing I would say is when you're sending out a release, you remember you don't have to send out everything what's going on all at once. You can take a multi-facet approach, like Danielle says, and like the news release is one part, and then there's another campaign that's being launched through your website, and it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. So, but it's important that it goes across all of those channels, the ones that you own, the ones that you cultivated, and I think that's really the best way to make sure that the news is getting in front of the people who need to see it.
This is Pam, and I would just add to listicles and bullets are very well received because it does make the content a little bit more consumable.
Thank you, Pam. Okay, so the next question, does keyword placement and repetition matter beyond incorporation in the headlines, for example, primarily in the lead paragraph?
So this is Kathy. I'll address that question. I think that keyword placement is important. It's important that it's early enough on, but again, it's not using the same keyword over and over and over. We used to read releases about wedding rings, and they would talk about wedding rings, and this about wedding rings, and that about wedding rings. Because search engines are super, super smart, and they understand the different synonyms about how things work. You can get the same message across, but you can write more for the human aspect of it versus trying to make sure that the search engine is going to capture that. And that's where we take a look at this. We see headlines that are 300 characters long. We might say you might want to think about breaking that up and making sure it's a shorter headline that's a little more concise. Use the subhead to tell more of the story, and then make sure you get to the meat of the matter in that lead paragraph. And once those things are in place, if it's a well-written release, the search engines will grab it.
And that kind of keyword stuffing, that example of the wedding rings, that's like an old black hat SEO thing that we're really trying to discourage now. Again, search engines are smart enough to pick up on it. It's also not going to really keep your readers invested in your content. And I think that search engines now are picking up chunks of that lead paragraph, and while you want to have relevant keywords, repeating the same one won't seem as natural. So try to incorporate other terms that are relevant to your business maybe, but don't try too hard at just filling it with keywords. People will pick up right away that it's unnatural.
Okay, great. So it looks like we have one more question, and that is, do releases always need to be so widely distributed?
I'll take that one. I think that it depends on what the goals are and who you're trying to reach and what the focus is. And I do believe, there's a lot of value in using a U.S. distribution, but if you are just a regional company or you have something that's local, of local interest, then that might just be what you need, just local focus. Do keep in mind that the websites and databases that we go to are included with every domestic newsline. So if it's something that you want to make discoverable online, if you go with something local, you're still going to be discoverable online. That's not going to go away. So just keeping that in mind. It does depend on what your goals are.
Thank you. Well, yeah, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to add an important note that our regional local distributions will also help meet disclosure. Web only wouldn't, but you can still achieve disclosure and hit all of those websites with a local or regional distribution, as Pam said.
Excellent. Well, that's all we have for the questions. Pam, Kathy, and Danielle, I wanted to, again, thank all of you for a very informative session. I wanted to also thank all of the attendees for attending this session, and I will also mention that we will be sending a copy of these slides, a recorded copy of these slides, to all of the attendees. And thanks for taking the time. And with that, we will end the webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.